people. Sorry about the delay. We were waiting for some music, but I guess it's here now.
Very subtle.
Yeah. My name is Audun Winger, and I'm the editor of Vinduet. And on behalf of that magazine and Larm, it's a great pleasure to introduce this man sitting here, the legendary musician, artist, producer, mensch, the wizard, the true star. Yeah, a mensch, a true star, Mr. Todd Rundgren.
Thank you.
But I guess you're supposed to be in your tropical paradise in Hawaii.
No, I'm supposed to be here. Otherwise, yes, I would be. I would be in Hawaii. It was a little stormy when I left, so it's not as if I'm missing the best part of the year.
But I saw a picture on the net that you were in LA on your way here.
That's right.
You were at the Grammys. I thought you wasn't a part of the music industry at all.
Well, I was not at the Grammys. I was at the at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party, which was on the Saturday evening before the Grammys. The Grammys, I'd been to one, and it was a couple of decades ago, so it wasn't as glitzy as it is now. But there are aspects of it that are just really boring. You know, just sitting there listening to people talk and that sort of thing. It's like any awards show. Most award shows look glitzy and fun when you see them on the TV, but when you're actually in the audience, they're boring. And so I kind of swore that I would never go to another Grammys after I attended one. And the other thing about the Grammys is, and about most awards ceremonies, I think, is they are less about the recognition of excellence and more about marketing music. It's always just a handful of people up for all of the awards. And I can see why it works, but it's such an old school model. It was the kind of thing where if somebody won 11 Grammys, then anyone who hadn't already bought the record would rush out to the record store and buy the record, and there'd be a sudden bump in the sales.
But do you feel like a part of the American record industry or music industry at all?
It's not that I came into the industry with some sort of outsider agenda. As a matter of fact, at first I wanted to have a successful band and enjoy all of those perks. We would always dress like we were in a rock band. And one night we went to see The Who play in Philadelphia. They were opening up for the Mamas and Papas, the good old days. There's a weird bill, you know. And we wanted to meet somebody in The Who. We wanted to meet Pete Townsend ideally, but anybody in The Who, we wanted to meet them. We found out they were staying at a Holiday Inn downtown, so me and the drummer went down there and discovered that Roger Daltrey was sitting in the bar. And The Who were such a new product, I guess, in America that nobody even knew who he was, except for us. So we went in and struck up a conversation with him. You know, we were talking there, and this older guy comes over to us, and he said, "You look like you're in a band, are you?" And I said, "Oh, well, yes, we are in a band." You know, we made it a point to look like we were in a band. So he was actually a publicist for the Mamas and Papas. He was working for their label, so the reason why he was there had nothing to do with The Who. But he happened to be in the market for a band. He wanted to move from publicity into management. So he's trying to discover somebody. And so he saw us, said, well, they look like what I'm looking for. And he hadn't heard a note of what we played. And during the course of this, even before we had made our first record, you know, during the course of shopping us, we lived like we were the Beatles, because our publicists thought that was what was necessary. Any event that happened in New York City, we showed up in a limousine, all dressed up to the nines. Our manager had a relationship with the editor of 16 magazine, which was the big teen magazine in those days. Her name was Gloria Stavers. And she and him decided together that they were going to make us the next big phenomenon. So we were getting spreads in 16 magazine before we ever had a record out. And And they'd shut down Henry Bendel's on Fifth Avenue just so we could have our hair done and do a photo session. Eventually, we did get signed and made a record, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened with the record. But during the course of that, and during it promoted, I got like a face full of everything that was the traditional, here in the late 60s, record business. And then eventually the band exploded. I left the band probably 18 months before I formed it, after I formed it. And we had made a couple of records, and I got the bug to engineer and produce through that, and definitely lost any interest in being in a band or being an artist, you know, being on the visible side. I wanted to make records. I didn't want to be a famous person.
But how did you know what production and engineering was?
We had little experience, and we thought that a record producer was actually what his job was to make the record sound a certain way. So we got a producer for our first record, and to our amazement, he just sat in the control room reading the trades all day, you know, and occasionally say, I don't know, maybe in the third verse it was a little out of tune. And then it came down to the mixing, and he made practically no contribution at all at that point. And so I said to myself, if that's it, you know, if that's all he's going to do, I'm going to do this myself. So by the time we got to the second NAS record, I was essentially telling the engineer, we hired no producer, I was telling the engineer what to do and lording it over all the other guys in the band, which pissed them off royally. And when it came time to mix it, I actually, for the first time in my life, sat down behind an audio desk and put my hands on it and started just learning. And the balancing part was, you know, pretty easy. You know, you hear it a certain way, and then you just move the faders around. The EQs were fascinating. During the course of that process, the assistant of our manager's partner essentially was watching me and seeing that I was starting to absorb this stuff. And when he found I had left the band, he invited me up to the Grossman office because his mandate was to find talent, and he thought, there's not really a house producer or engineer at the Grossman organization. And the big breakthrough, I guess, was when I was asked to go to Toronto and help and engineer an album by an artist named Jesse Winchester. Robbie Robertson from the band was the producer, and the players were like Levon and Rick. It wasn't the whole band, but it was a couple of the guys from the band. So they liked how efficiently I got the sound together for them. What I learned in my very first projects was, first of all, how to make the drums sound good. So after the Jesse Winchester album, they were happy with the sound aspect of it, and they asked me to engineer Stage Fright. And that, at that point, that was kind of the highest profile act that I had worked with, and it got me a lot of attention. It was a very interesting project in that there was no producer. If you look on most of the band's album, there's no producer credit because they do it all by committee, which takes forever. Oh, man. I think it's one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of acts need a producer. And I actually got something of a reputation as being someone who would get in the studio and really drive the process, you know, not just let it happen, but take charge of it and make it happen.